Konichiwa! Welcome to Chocolate with Ed Garcia. I'm Ed Garcia, and this is chocolate. Lovely chocolate. The best thing in the whole world is chocolate. I love chocolate. Today I have strawberry flavored chocolate, one of my favorite. Real strawberry with real strawberry seeds that I can taste. There's also, of course, mint flavored chocolate. Oh, that's very good too. And plain milk chocolate, that's good. Dark chocolate, oh, wonderful, wonderful. White chocolate, now is white chocolate really chocolate? I don't know. Chocolate covered strawberry, chocolate milk, chocolate covered anything. All chocolate is good. You have your chocolate, bring it near your lips, ready, 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 go. Oishii, oishii. Simultaneous chew of chocolate. The best thing in the world is to have a simultaneous chew of chocolate with your friends. This is fun. Today, speech number 6. Gold mining. Yay! Get some gold, some keen. Well, we're going to data mine, but it's very similar to gold mining. As you know, I'm a U.S. patent attorney. I used to be a patent examiner, and there's my email. Today is the 26th of October. 1, 2, 3, go! Here is a United States stamp, 1999, regarding the California gold rush. In 1849, they found gold in California. Yay, gold! Keen, keen! Everyone was very happy. Many people, millions of people, went to California to look for gold. Here are many men in the river trying to get gold from the river. The river is a good place to find gold. It's a lot of work. This man is a gold miner. Notice his pick. This pick is used. See how it's shiny up here? And look at the handle. This is a short handled pick. It's only this long. It's used for digging inside of a tunnel. Okay, a small tunnel. Imagine going into the dirt. You cannot stand up, and you're digging, digging, digging with this short handled pick for 12 hours. The dirt's falling on you. It's a very hard thing to do. We, being lawyers and engineers, don't like to get dirty, so we're going to dig in the data. Here's an Excel spreadsheet for 50 patent applications. I looked at 50 published applications from one Japanese company, and I downloaded from the patent office public information. 50 IFWs, information file wrappers. So I see everything. It's wonderful. Back around 2002, the patent office switched from a paper system to an image system. So this is the IFW image file wrapper. I have 50 columns, one for each application, and I have many rows of information, one for each type of data that I'm trying to collect, as you will see. We're going to cover 5 topics. Restrictions, 20% were restricted. Titles, 10% were non-descriptive. Indefiniteness in the first office action, 28%. And interviews, applicant initiated interviews. 49% of the applicant initiated interviews occurred before the second office action. And some other general data. Here is a part of the Excel spreadsheet expanded slightly, and this red part here is the first office action. First response is here. There are up to 5 office actions and 5 responses for these this data set of 50 applications. Of course there could be more, but that's as far as any of these went. 2 of them went to the 5th office action or the fifth response. Let's look more closely at just one of these office actions. Here's the first office action, and I'm just going to read quickly the what each line represents. Office action was mailed. There were 48 out of the 50, so 96%. What happened to the other two? Why only 48 of 50? Well, one of them was expressly abandoned before the first office action. Another one received an allowance before the first office action. There was a restriction and then an allowance before the first office action. That happened once. All others received a first office action. Is it final or non-final? Was a new title required? Were the drawings objected to? Specification objected to? Specification written description? Means for interpretation? Claim objections? Indefiniteness rejection? 101, which is statutory subject matter rejection. 102, which is anticipation rejection. 103, which is obviousness. Double patenting rejections. And was there indicated allowable subject matter? These are the things that I determined for every first office action, and there were 48 of them. So you see, this was a lot of work. Let's talk about restrictions. As you recall, I gave a speech on restrictions, speech number 5, and I had the 216 rule, the golden rule, the Garcia rule. If you have 2 or less independent claims and 16 or less total claims, my theory, I did not have any proof, is that this would reduce the number of restrictions. But I did not have any data to support that, just my experience. So now I have some data. If you follow my rule, well, first, the average overall restriction was 10 out of 50, which is 20%. Now, if you follow my rule, my 216 rule, 10% restriction, okay? Follow my rule. You reduce the restrictions from 20% down to 10%. And if you disobey my rule, disobey actually both parts of my rule, so you have more than 2 independent claims and more than 16 total claims, that happen 9 times, and 4 of those are restrictions, so 4 out of 9 is 44%. So if you obey my rule, it goes from 20% to 10%. If you disobey my rule, it goes from 20% to 40%. All right? Big difference. Big difference. In fact, you could look at this more simply. Just look at the number of independent claims. It's a very strong factor. 1 independent claim, 11% chance of restriction. 2 independent claims, 15% chance of restriction. 3 independent claims, 28% chance of restriction. More than 3 independent claims, 67% chance of restriction. All right? So the more independent claims, the higher chance of restriction, especially the 4th or 5th or 6th. It's greater than 3. Once you start paying excess claim fees for more than 3 independent claims, you get into the 67% chance of restriction. So what happens when you pay the United States government $420 for that 4th independent claim, that excess claim? What happens? The examiner restricts you 2 out of 3 times. So don't do it. Okay, we're just going to skip this slide. Let's talk about titles. Bad titles. Non-descriptive titles. The examiner should require descriptive titles, but he does not always do that. Now, in this sample, 5 of 50 were identified as non-descriptive and new titles were required. If I say the title was rejected, you understand what I mean. Here are the 5. Battery pack and battery charger. Okay. You can go to any store and buy a battery pack and a battery charger. Where's the invention? Where's the claimed invention? No hint. Portable power tool. Well, I have one in the other room. Where? What part of it is patentable? Where is the claimed invention? Electric power tool, same thing. These have no value. They're not useful. Battery pack including shock absorbing device. Engine. Clearly indefinite. Excuse me. Clearly non-descriptive. Let's consider other titles for reasons that will become clear. Here are 10 titles, the first 10 titles of this batch of 50 samples that I looked at. By the way, I chose publications from the year 2014, the first 50 publications from one Japanese company. The reason I chose 2014 was because all of the applications by now should be finished, should be either allowed or abandoned. Okay, there's no other choices. Allowed, abandoned, or well, I guess pending. They could still be in process. They may still be pending, but in the end, allowed or abandoned. So here are the 10. I just want to point out a few of them. The first one was identified by the examiner as non-descriptive. Battery pack and battery charger. How about this one? Power cutter? Clearly non-descriptive. How about motor-driven appliance and battery pack? I mean, is that any better than electric power tool? Not really. Trigger switch. What about the trigger switch? Now, people argue about what level of description is necessary to describe the claimed invention. And one way to understand that is by considering improved. Okay? As we previously discussed, the word improved is not allowed by the Patent Office. Well, technically, the examiner should require a new title for the word improved or the word new. In fact, the Patent Office can remove these words from your title. This is important because let's consider improved braking. Okay, so we've told this title says we have improved the braking. So it's not just a power tool like a circular saw it's the braking, and the braking is improved. Well, how is it improved? The Patent Office does not want this word improved or new. It wants you to explain what is improved. What is improved? How is it improved? What part has been changed? And it wants that in the title, okay? If you put it in the title, it helps the applicant, it helps the examiner, it helps the public, and it should be required by the examiner. So we've shown now, I think I've proved to you, convinced you that many of these titles, many of these other titles are non-descriptive, but yet were not identified by the examiner as non-descriptive. We can call that under-identification, or we can call that laziness. So let's talk about false negatives. The doctor says to you, you do not have cancer. No cancer. And then you go home and you start coughing, and it turns out, you find out the next day with another doctor, you have lung cancer. You've been smoking cigarettes for 30 years. You have lung cancer. But the first doctor said no lung cancer. He was wrong. He said no, and it was incorrect. That was a false negative, okay? His analysis, his test was false negative. Similarly, when this examiner, examiner did not require a new title here for this title having the word improved, that was a false negative. He implied that this title did not have anything wrong. It did have something wrong. So The reason I'm discussing these titles again is to illustrate this concept of false negative. Let's look at it another way. When you see a piece of ice floating in water or an iceberg floating in the ocean, only a small part of the ice is above the water. Okay? Here's the water, here's the ice. You see this piece of ice, but most of it is below the water. You don't see it in the ocean. You see a little bit of the iceberg, and the rest of it, most of it is below the water. You don't see it, but you know it's there, okay? Anytime you see that little bit, you know that there's a lot underneath. Similarly, for the titles, when the examiner is rejecting 10% of the titles, you know that 50%, 80%, maybe 90% of the titles are bad. The examiner is not rejecting them, but you know they are bad. Similarly, my opinion is the same thing occurs with indefiniteness. When there is one rejection for indefiniteness, there are other indefinite claims, other indefinite applications that are not being rejected. We have under identification or false negative, if you will. We're going to skip this one. So, as I said, in my opinion, there are more indefinite claims than only 28%. It's more than that. Your C, 28%. The examiner is rejecting 28%, but the real number is much higher. How much higher? I estimate 1 out of 2, only 1 out of 2 indefiniteness sets of claims are identified, or maybe only 1 out of 3. So therefore, 28% times 2 equals 56%, or times 3 equals 84%. I estimate between 56% and 84% of the applications have indefinite claims, more than half. The examiner is identifying 28%, which is 1 out of 4. That's a serious problem. There's nothing small about that. It's a serious problem. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. That's only the tip of the iceberg. There are many more, okay? Similar to the non-descriptive claims, only a few are identified by the examiner. But it tells you that there are many more. When you see the tip of the iceberg, you know there are many more. More than half of these applications have indefinite claims. That's my interpretation. Let's talk about interviews, specifically applicant-initiated interviews, AIIV. We're not going to discuss examiner-initiated interviews at this time. There are some things I could say, but we're not going to discuss it. There were 39 applicant-initiated interviews during these 50 applications. Now, of these 39, 19 occurred before the second office action. We'll talk about why this is important. So 38% of the applications had interviews before the second office action, which is before the examiner has reviewed any written arguments that you provide regarding the first office action. And this is before the examiner has searched any amended or new claim features. Okay? We'll discuss why that's important. So, 19 out of 39 of these applicant-initiated interviews equals 49%, approximately 50% of the interviews occurred before the second office action. Okay? That's not good. We'll see why. As I said before in my speech on interviews, many of these interviews are a waste of time because they want to discuss new features which are being added to the claims, and the examiner has not yet had a chance to search these features. Well, let me rephrase that. He has a chance in preparing for the interview, but he's not allocated enough time. So he is not going to search a new feature until you provide that new feature as part of a claim in a response. Okay? So it's important that any technical features which you might want to add to the claims later, if all the present claims are rejected and you want to add some feature later, don't wait till later. Add all technical features to the original set of claims. Okay? Don't put yourself in this position where you're going to add a feature and require a new search. Force the examiner to search all of the technical features in the first office action. Okay? First set of claims is very important if you want to save money, if you want to prosecute the application quickly, compactly, compact, like a compact car. You want everything to be tight, squeezed together. You want all the technical features in the original claims. Very important. And of course, you also want them to be definite. But let's give the example, very similar to my previous speech on interviews. This happens very frequently. Look at the red. The proposed amendment to Claim 1 overcomes the prior art rejection. Further search and consideration would be required. So now, what has been accomplished by this interview? Nothing. Nothing. We've spent $1,000 to accomplish nothing. It was a waste of time. Now, among the 19 interviews that I'm discussing provided before the second office action, there was one that was a little bit different, and here it is. This one, the blue. The outstanding 112 rejection, I think for indefiniteness, was discussed, but no agreement was reached. Okay, so no agreement was reached. We discussed it. Cost $1,000. Accomplished nothing. Accomplished nothing, or very little. Any arguments regarding indefiniteness rejection should be made in writing. The examiner, it's kind of a complex issue. The examiner is not going to spend much time on this. Yeah. Try to solve your problems in writing first, okay? The patent office is designed for writing. Written office action, written response. If your written response fails and you still think that you are correct, but you have failed to convince the examiner, then an interview is a very reasonable thing. But that sequence will not occur until the second office action occurs. It's going to occur after the second office action. Let's talk about general data. In particular, let's talk about the movie and the book Moneyball. Yay! With Brad Pitt. Moneyball is a book written by Michael Lewis about baseball, about money in baseball. There's a team, the Oakland A's, is it the Oakland Angels? I'm not sure, that was trying to win ball games but had very little money. So they hired some computer guys to analyze baseball, analyze the players, analyze how do you win a baseball game. What's important? Home runs, you score, yay! It looks beautiful, everybody claps, he scored a home run, he's very strong, that's good. But it turns out that the most important thing for winning a game is not getting out. Okay? So a home run is nice, but getting to first base is almost as good. A single is almost as good as a home run. Okay? It's very valuable. A double, triple, those are nice, but they're not very much more valuable than a single. The important thing is don't get out. As long as you don't get out, the next guy gets to come on base, and you keep scoring, and you score an infinite number of runs if you don't get out. So the important thing is don't get out. Get to first base somehow. Single, that's okay. Home run, that's okay. You go all the way around, you pass first base. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a home run, but you don't want to strike out trying to get a home run. You'd rather walk to first base. Any way to get to first base. Anyway, enough about baseball. The point is, similarly, they want wins in baseball. We want allowances. We want patents. We don't want applications. Filing an application is like playing a baseball game. It doesn't do you any good. What you want is you want to win the baseball game. You want to receive the patent or the notice of allowance. So, how do you waste money? One way is by abandonments. Okay, if you have a high percentage of abandonments, that means that the cost per patent is going to be very high. So you want to avoid abandonments. If you have a patent application and you look at it, an experienced attorney looks at it and he says, this kind of thing can't be allowed, and I've seen lots of those, it should not be filed. It should not even be filed, right? Why waste the money? Excess claim fees, as I just showed you, many excess claim fees are paid and generate an increased chance of restriction. So you lose the excess claim. So the excess claims are very expensive. If you file 3 applications, each one having a fourth independent claim that you pay, I think it's $420. Well, 2 of those are going to be restricted. You're going to be left with one fourth independent claim that cost you 420 times 3, $1,260 for one fourth independent claim. All right, very expensive, very expensive. And the time lost, that's just government fees. We're not even considering the time and money lost due to the restrictions. So that one fourth independent claim cost you the expense of 3 independent claims, 3 extra independent claims, and it cost you 2 restrictions. So really it cost you $2,000, $3,000 to get the examiner to examine one extra independent claim. Costs on average $2,000 or $3,000. Okay, it does not cost $420. You have to consider the cost of the other restrictions and the cost of of the lost excess government fees, excess claim fees. It's very, very, very expensive. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't pay excess claim fees. Just don't do it. Where was I? Extension of time fees. Okay. You talk about throwing money away. Let's just throw money away. Not only are you throwing away the fee, but you're also throwing away the life of your patent, right? Every extra month that you spend replying to an office action is 1 month less that the patent will be alive. Now depending, so how much is 1 month of patent life? Between $50 and $100. Okay, so you waste 1 month during prosecution, you've lost $100 of life of the patent. Okay, it's not just the extension of time fee. And there are some other indirect costs that I don't want to get into now. They are subtle, but they hurt. RCE fees. What does an RCE fee mean? An RCE fee means that you have had 2 chances to put your claims into good condition for appeal, and you have not done so. You had the original claims, you had a chance, and you had a response to the first office action, and now after the second and final office action, you still are not in a position to appeal. Okay? That's what an RCE means. That's what an RCE means. They're expensive. Late declaration fees, approximately, I'm not sure, 3 to 5 of these applications had notice of missing parts. The declaration by the inventor was not present during the original application. It was filed later with a late fee of $140. It's a lot of money if it's your money. And it adds up. It adds up, right? Times 5 is $700. Most interviews. Again, most interviews are a waste of time and money. Don't do it. And by this analysis, I find out that it increases the chance of an extension of time. Okay. General data. Approximately 65%, my estimate is that for this applicant, 65% of his applications are allowed. In this sample of 50, we found 68% were allowed, 34 out of 50. The USPTO average is 70. So we look at this and we say, okay, it's almost 70%, almost average, probably within the margin of error. But I did another sample previously for this company, and I found 25 out of 40, which is 62% allowance. So we average these together, actually we add them together, and we come out with 65% allowance rate, and which is 35% abandoned. Okay, so you file 3 applications, 1 is abandoned. Now that's, 5% below the average, which is relevant, statistically relevant. But this applicant has excellent inventions, good drawings. This applicant should have a 90% allowance rate, okay? They're getting a 65% allowance rate. They should have 90% allowance rate, all right? That would greatly decrease the average cost of a patent for these people. Now, they had 2% first action allowance, and the USPTO average is 11%, all right? So out of 50 applications, they should receive on the average 5 first action allowances, okay? Patent Office writes you a letter saying, good job, perfect, thank you, please pay your issue fee and we'll give you a patent, okay? That should happen 5 times. It happened once out of 50, 2% of the time. Now, in fact, yes and no. I mean, actually, it may have not happened. There was a restriction before the allowance. So depending on how you define it, it happened once out of 50 or it happened 0 out of 50. Now, for this company, I have another sample, which I'm not including here, and I've measured 5% first action allowance. It was a much smaller sample. So if we add them together, I think probably this applicant has, for larger numbers, well, between 2% and 5%. I would say 3%, 4% at most. I don't think 4%, 3%. Let me say 3%, plus or minus 1. That's my best guess for a larger sample of these people. So 3% is a lot less than 11%, right? If you file 100 applications, you get 3. If you get 3%. If you file 100 applications, you get 11. 10 plus 1. That's a big difference. That's a big difference. 28% indefinite rejection in first office action, but as I said, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Really, it's 56% to 84%. It causes many problems. That's kind of high. 18% RCE, that's not unreasonable, but it's relatively low because there were so many abandonments. 0 appeals. I don't like that. Out of 50, there should be an appeal, maybe 2. Appeals are good. There's nothing wrong with an appeal. Now, many people avoid appeals because they think when you appeal, of course, it costs some money, and there's a very long delay before the board will give you an answer, before the board says yes or no to your appeal. But the truth is, having been an examiner, when you file an appeal, most of those, the large majority, do not go to the patent office. Excuse me, do not go to the Board of Appeals. The large majority of appeals that are made are met with another office action or an allowance. Only a small percentage are met with an examiner's answer that goes to the board, and now you have to wait. That's very rare. It's very rare. Let's see, what else do we have here? Yeah, 0 appeals. Okay, continuing. A bit more general data. Let's talk about office actions as a measure of how expensive things are. Every office action on average has, well, it turns out to almost half of an interview for each office action on average. Perhaps half of information disclosure statement. As we saw well, 10% of an RCE on average, roughly. So all these other costs are kind of associated with the office actions. They're a reasonable measure of how expensive things are. Now, 94 office actions out of 50 applications, 1.9 office actions per application, approximately 2. And roughly, just to keep the numbers simple, let's say $5,000 per office action. That includes the office action, includes paying the U.S. attorney, maybe some information disclosure statements, the occasional RC, etc. etc. Okay. Just to keep the numbers easy, 5 times 2 is $10,000 per application. Now, truth is, that sounds, 2 office actions sounds reasonable per application. But let's consider it per patent, per win, right? We're trying to buy wins. We're trying to buy patents. We're not trying to buy applications. We're trying to buy patents. 94 office actions divided by 34 patents equals 2.8 office actions per patent. That's about 3. That's a little bit high. That's high. So at $5,000 per, so now we see that we're actually paying $15,000 per patent. It doesn't really matter what we're paying per application because we don't care. We don't care. We care about wins. We care about patents. We need to look at this as cost per patent, not cost per application, not cost per response, cost per patent. And let's move on. Okay, now let's talk about general data, some unusual things that happened. One of these applications had 3 petitions regarding finality, meaning the examiner provided the final office action and the petitioner, the applicant, believed that it should be non-final. Well, procedurally, legally, what he did is perfectly valid, perfectly legal, filing a petition with the Office of Petitions. But it's not an efficient way of doing this. What you should do is, number 1, provide a written argument with your response, with a written argument saying why finality of the previous office action was improper, why it should have been a non-final office action. That's the first step. If the examiner agrees with you, he will withdraw finality. Everything is good. If he disagrees with you, then you have a telephone interview, including the supervisor. Okay? You've made a written argument, the examiner doesn't believe it, and this finality issue is relatively clear, right? If the examiner doesn't understand your argument, then it's time to bring a supervisor in. All right? So you bring in the supervisor and you solve the problem. So now the supervisor is involved, and the supervisor will educate the examiner. If it happens again, you don't even call the examiner, you call the supervisor directly. The hell with an examiner interview at that point. If he does it again, you call the supervisor directly, and that should solve the problem, right? It won't happen. Once you bring a supervisor in for the first interview, the problem will be solved. But if it does happen a second time, you call the supervisor directly. If it happens a third time, as in this case, you don't call the supervisor, you don't file a petition, you call the director of the technology center. You go to the director. You don't waste time with this. If you want to file a petition, you want to go that process, it's acceptable. But if you see the problem a second time, clearly the petition process failed to educate the examiner. Certainly at that point, you should contact the supervisor. Filing 3 petitions regarding finality in one application is ridiculous. Let's continue. Interviews. There were 5 interviews in one office, in one application. All right, that's understandable. If the examiner really likes, if the applicant really likes the examiner and wants to talk to the examiner 5 times in one application, then the examiner and the applicant or the applicant's attorney should get married, okay? That's the only reason there should be 5 interviews in one application, is you're getting married. If they're not getting married, then something is wrong. This is just silly. It's just silly. This is 5 interviews in one application. It's just a waste of money. There were 16 total extensions of time. 16. And I predicted, in my head, I did not make a public prediction, that having interviews would cause more extensions of time, would have a high probability of having an extension of time due to, of course, all the things that have to happen to schedule the interview, have the interview, maybe including proposed claim amendments, discussion of what happened, and then amendments, etc. So it takes time. It may cause extensions of time. And sure enough, the average percentage is 15% chance of extension of time in the response number 1 on average. But if there was an interview, then the average goes to 29%. It basically doubles, right? So having an interview increases the chance of an extension of time. So you need to consider the cost of the extension of time. It's not a large amount of money, but it's money, right? It's one more bad thing that happens when you have an interview before the second office action. It causes additional extensions of time. RCEs, there were 9 RCEs. As I said, an RCE means that you are not ready to appeal. And there were no appeals. Now, I don't think that's good. I think there should be an appeal out of 50. Yeah, there should be an appeal. There were several late oaths and declarations. I did not keep track of this. I saw one, and then later on I saw another one, and then later on I saw another one. I think there were perhaps 3 or 5 over the course of 50. Now, $140 late fee for filing the oath or declaration late. You receive a notice of missing parts, then you have to file $140 for the late fee, and the attorney may or may not charge you for that, for filing the late fee. He should. In any case, it's not good. It's $140. AFCP analysis. We have enough data here to make AFCP, after final consideration, program analysis to support one of my previous speeches, but I have not done that. Now, in addition to all of this useful information that I've given you, there's other chunks of gold, keen, that I found that are very useful, and I'm not going to give them to you. I'm keeping them. I did all this work on weekends, and yeah, I'm giving you some of the information, but other information I'm keeping. I will use it to help you, but I'm not giving you all of my information. I'm not giving you everything I learned. No. I'm giving you most of it, but I'm keeping some. Conclusions. The chocolate rule. The chocolate 216 rule. If you follow my 216 rule, you will reduce the 20% average restriction down to 10% average restriction. That would, in this batch of 50, that would reduce the 10 restrictions down to 5 restrictions, okay? You would save the expense of 5 restrictions. What's the total expense of a restriction? Well, let's just call it $1,000 to make the numbers easy. 5 restrictions, $5,000. I have reduced the average cost. If you do this, follow this rule, you will reduce the average cost of a patent application by $5,000 divided by 50, $100. Okay, that's pretty nice. And you have reduced the cost of each patent by $150. $150. Okay? $150. Titles. 10% non-descriptive. As I previously stated, bad titles cause many problems. It seems like a very small thing that's not important, but it is important. And additionally, it illustrates the theory of false negatives, the medical term false negatives, or under-identification of problems by the examiner. The examiner generally under-identifies problems. He under-identifies non-descriptive titles. Okay, there are many non-descriptive that he does not identify, and he under-identifies indefinite claims. There are many indefinite claims that he does not identify. These are serious problems. So for indefiniteness, 28% indefinite in the first office action. That's just a tip of the iceberg. How many are really indefinite? Times 2 or times 3? 56% to 84%. The majority of applications have indefinite claims. I'm going to say it again. The majority of applications have indefinite claims. Causes many problems, including rejections under 102 or 103 that are not very good, because you have an indefinite claim. The rejection cannot be very good. So you have to amend to clarify, and you've spent an office action. Interviews. 19 of the 39 interviews, or 49%, occurred before the second office action was mailed. Wasted. I read all these interview summaries. All 19 are wasted. They're just wasted interviews. So let's call it about $1,000 per interview. Let's call it $20,000. That works out to $400 per application, or $600 per patent. Okay? So you add these little things up, and all of a sudden you're getting close to $1,000. Now the big ticket item is reducing abandonments and reducing office actions. And the way to do that is to have better claims initially, better original claims that are 1, definite, and 2, claim all potentially patentable features. I want to say that again. 1, they're definite. 2, they claim all potentially patentable features. Okay, you do that, you're going to have a higher allowance rate, you're going to have less office actions per patent, you're going to solve many problems, and have higher quality patents. The patents that do issue will be higher quality, because many of these indefiniteness problems are never solved during the prosecution, right? The examiner finds 1 out of, let's say 1 out of 3, the applicant finds 1 out of 3, and the other 1 out of 3 just kind of slips through and is found in litigation. Okay, let's continue. The end of Chocolate with Ed Garcia. We talked about gold mining, we talked about data mining. We found little bits of gold, and we found some nice chunks of gold. It was fun. We learned a lot. This was the best speech ever. The best speech ever. I'm going to say it for the 3rd time so you remember. This was the best speech ever. And there's Mount Fuji. Cushion Pine at Aoyama. Aoyama Enza no Matsu. This Japanese guy is pointing to Mount Fuji. And there's his son or his daughter looking at Mount Fuji. Fuji-san. Thank you very much for coming and for listening to me. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun. I know I enjoyed sharing chocolate with you. The simultaneous chew was wonderful. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu. Sayonara. Bye-bye.